poker players, this is Steve Selbrady again, and I have a tournament hand for you today. This is a $10 RNA hand I played on the WSOP.com site. It explores the tough situation we sometimes face when we are near the bubble with a big hand. The blinds are 600, 1200 with 150 antes, so we already have 3,000 chips in the pot. We have 33 players remaining with 30 of them cashing, so this is a bubble decision. I'm under the gun with pocket rockets and a 28,000 chip stack, which is about 23 big blinds. It's my action. What should I do here? This is a cheap $10 tournament, so it's tempting to just try to get it all in. But I try to play these events as though they were expensive WSOP bracelet events. That means I want to cash. I have about 23 big blinds, so I can easily fold to the money, but I also have a large enough stack to risk some of it. 3 of my opponents could possibly bust me, so this is not a trivial decision for me. Even so, I would be posting about 2.5 big blinds in my next 2 hands, so I can afford to lose perhaps half of my stack in this hand while still likely cashing. So I'm going to open here. I normally open to about 2.5 big blinds or so, but I want to keep the size of the pot small, especially if I get multiple callers. So I raise the minimum 2x. So I open to 2 big blinds, and everyone folds to the big blind. Who calls? This is a good result for me, since I can probably control the size of the pot against a single opponent, and since I have superior chip utility against this guy, as well as superior position. You might ask, what would I have done if the cutoff had raised to 6 big blinds with his big stack? That's a tougher decision, since 6 big blinds would be a quarter of my starting stack. I might call, but if there were also a caller in between, I wouldn't be able to play properly post-flop. So I would probably fold in that situation. The flop is Jack 3-4 with 2 spades. And the big blind checks. What should I do here? I can bet here again without risking my cash. Betting half pot risks less than 3 big blinds out of my 21 big blind stack. I could also bid a bit less, perhaps about 1/3 of a pot. Also, since I have the villain covered, barely, he is unlikely to be overly aggressive without a premium flop. So I prefer to c-bet here. So I bet half pot, and the villain calls. The turn is a 3, which pairs the board. The villain could have a pair of jacks or trip 3s or a spade draw, but he checks again. What should we do now? Since the villain checked, he doesn't likely have trips. The pot is 11 big blinds, and I have 18, so a half pot bet would reduce my stack to about 13 big blinds, which is near the end of my safety net. I could bet only a 1/3 pot here, giving me a bit larger safety net, but I'm going to bet again one way or the other. I decided to bet half pot again, and the villain calls again. The river is a queen of clubs, so the spade draw misses. The villain checks again, which likely means he doesn't have queen jack or any other 2-pair hand, or he would have jammed at that point. So I'm very likely ahead here. What should I do? Many players will say to themselves, I'm probably ahead here, so I should bet again. But there are 2 big factors to consider. First, can I get called again by a worse hand that could bust out by calling me? Is there a value bet here for me? The answer could be yes, but the second factor tips the balance for me. If I bet again and lose, I probably won't cash. If I check behind and lose, I will still cash. So checking behind has a dollar EV of about 30 bucks. Betting and losing has a dollar EV of about 0. Betting and winning has a dollar EV similar to checking behind and winning, so checking is likely the best dollar EV decision for me. So I checked behind, and the villain showed Jack, King of Hearts. So he had flopped top pair with a good kicker, but was too timid to jam on the flop or the turn. If he had, I might have had to fold. So this hand worked out for me. I cashed and went on to the final table. The preceding hand history is fairly controversial in some respects, so let's look at what GTO Wizard has to say about it. First, we set up the solver to be an 8 max MTT with 20 big blind effective stacks, which we can see right here, 20 big blind effective stacks. We choose 20 big blinds because that's the size of the stack that Hero is putting at risk. So Hero is under the gun with pocket aces. We can see that pocket aces has a pure strategy raise to 2 big blinds, which is what in fact we did in the hand. You can see that this is a considerable more profitable action than jamming would be, more than 2.5 big blinds more profitable, or about 2.5 big blinds. And of course, folding the aces here would be a GTO Wizard or a GTO mistake. Now, we can also see that all of the hands that we would play under the gun are openings. We do not jam with any hand at all. So we're not jamming even though we have 20 big blinds. So we raise, and it folds all the way to the big blinds action, and the big blind has a very wide calling range of about 66%, and some jamming range over the top of our range here. But the actual decision was to call, and then we have a flop of three of spades, jack of diamonds, and 4 of spades. And the action is on the big blind, and we can see that the villain will check 100% of his range. So he checks, and the action is on us. We have aces, and we can see that basically we have a mixed strategy of betting various amounts. Okay, checking is one of the lowest profitability actions, 7.26. Slightly lower would be raising or betting 100% of the pot, 125% of the pot, or even more, going all in. So we can see that betting 20% or a third or half a pot are roughly equivalent actions here in terms of profitability. So we bet about half pot, 3 big blinds, which is pretty close to what we actually bet in the hand, and we can see that the villain still has a very wide calling range here, and the villain does call. Now the turn is another 3. Let's make it a 3 of diamonds this time, and the action is again on the big blind. You can see that he bets sometimes. Actually, he's going to bet it with about 63% of his range, and he's going to check about a third of his range. In this particular case, he checks, and it's on us with aces again. We can see that once again a bet of between 20% and about half is about the same EV, but half pot does have slightly the best EV. So that's what we do. We bet again half pot, and the villain calls again. The river is the queen of clubs. And the action is again on the big blind, who checks again. Now it's on us, again with aces. And we can see that the optimum bet is a jam at 22.87 big blinds. Betting a really small amount is slightly worse, about 1.4 big blinds worse, and checking is the worst. However, this is only about 3 big blinds worse than the optimum bet. But remember, GTO Wizard optimizes the chip EV of our situation and does not consider chip utility or ICM. So although chip EV for checking is about 3 big blinds worse than jamming, a dollar EV calculation would likely make a check more profitable. So we can conclude that GTO Wizard isn't a bad guide for this particular short stack hand until we reach the river. You might want to pause now and rewind the last few minutes and look at the GTO Wizard recommendations from the villain's point of view, now that we know he had King Jack suited. Try to figure out where he made his mistakes. So, what lessons have we learned today? First, when we are near the bubble and our stack is large enough to fold to a cash, but not very much larger, we should generally fold our big hands. My general advice here is to cash first, win later, as controversial as that often is. But when our stack is a bit larger, we should estimate how much of our stack we can afford to risk. Then we play the hand accordingly. We should not risk our cash. GTO solvers don't usually consider chip utility or ICM, so we must be careful when we use GTO solvers near the bubble. Remember, our real goal is to maximize our dollar EV, not our chip EV, and the bubble can distort the solver's advice. Although we can't usually calculate our ICM EV in real time, we know that the dollar EV of a bet is always lower than its chip EV near the bubble. This reduces the profitability of a bet enough so that checking is often the most profitable play. Hope you enjoyed the hand. That's all, folks. So I bet half pot, and the villain calls. The turn is a 3, which pairs the board. The villain could have a pair of jacks or trip 3s or a spade draw, but he checks again. What should we do now? Since the villain checked, he doesn't likely have trips. The pot is 11 big blinds, and I have 18, so a half pot bet would reduce my stack to about 13 big blinds, which is near the end of my safety net. I could bet only a third pot here, giving me a bit larger safety net, but I'm going to bet again one way or the other.